After 39 years of marriage, a small-town Oregon couple was looking forward to their golden years.
They were working very hard to have their retirement.
Until suddenly, a bizarre chain of events interrupts their plans.
He said, there's a woman out there, they threw her off the bridge.
I'm unconscious for a while, and I can't get to my knees.
She looked like she'd been through hell.
A violent crime sparks a desperate search for answers.
They have one victim whose whereabouts are unknown.
Did someone kidnap him and they're going to hold him for ransom? You don't know.
They had two outstanding suspects who were reported to be armed.
As investigators dig into the mystery, secrets come to the surface.
It was like watching a freight train that was headed for a wreck and couldn't stop it.
Were you seeing somebody else?
No, we are Christians.
Yeah,
I'm just
Christians
talking about their
love triangles,
personalities.
too.
And you never know just how far someone will go to cover their tracks.
There's definitely human remains in there.
This is something you don't want to believe.
2009, Corbett, Oregon. It's a crisp winter morning when local residents Gerald Fort and Jim Pogue make their way into town and notice a flash of movement as they cross the Gordon Creek Bridge.
It was early in the morning, and I seen a hand come up out of the weeds. I crossed the bridge, and I thought maybe one of them fishermen fell down, so I backed up, asked Jim to go out and see what was going on. He came back to the truck and said, there's a woman out there. And he says, help me drag her up to the road. I said, no, don't touch her. If she's injured, don't even touch her. Just stay with her. I'll run up the hill and get cell service. I'll call 911.
While Gerald seeks higher elevation to summon help, Jim stays with the victim, who identifies herself as Lynn Stomps.
Her fingernails were all worn down because she was crawling up the embankment to get to somebody to get help for her.
Officers responded to a 911 call and found Lynn seriously injured, and she had reported to them that she had been the victim of a violent crime.
Though Lynn is in great pain, she's desperate to tell first responders that she isn't the only victim.
Lynn was telling investigators was that there was two guys that they met to sell a boat, and they had attacked her and her husband, Jerry.
Lynn said the boat wasn't with them. It was back at their property.
According to Lynn, Jerry had met the potential buyers online and wanted to meet first before bringing them by to see the boat.
They were going to fish in the Sandy River, I believe, and talk about them buying the boat.
She said she stayed in the pickup truck while Jerry went down a pathway towards the river. After a short period of time, she got out of the vehicle.
The moment she stepped out of the truck, Lynn realized she wasn't alone.
Jerry was yelling at her to run. So she took off running across the bridge, and she was being chased by this second suspect who displayed a firearm, overtook her, grabbed her by a backpack, and threw her off of the bridge. The officers had a violent crime that was reported, a seriously injured victim, a second victim who was outstanding and maybe in need of aid or worse, dead.
Born and raised in Gresham, Oregon, Jerry Stomps was 19 years old when he met Lynn Plant in 1969.
Jerry and Lynn had a pretty good relationship. They just kind of clicked. When you would see them, you knew that they were together.
From the moment they met, Lynn and Jerry were smitten with each other. But there was one thing that would keep them apart: the war in Vietnam.
He was in Vietnam in 68, 69 as an MP in Saigon. He was a military guy.
Though Jerry was away at war, he and Lynn kept in touch through letters. Shortly after he returned to the States, the two married. To some, they may have seemed like an unexpected pair, but Jerry and Lynn proved that opposites really do attract.
She was a sweet gal, very nice person.
Jerry was just Jerry. I've never come across anybody else like him. He was very bold. If somebody said, no, you can't do that, oh, yes, he could.
He didn't trust anybody. He didn't trust government. He didn't trust corporations. He didn't trust police. All he trusted was Jerry and God.
Still, Lynn had a way of breaking through his tough exterior. And in 1973, Jerry's heart softened when he and Lynn welcomed a son, Jason, followed by Adam in 1976.
Lynn was a very natural-born mom. She just took right to it, just boom. She'd have the baby, and then she was up working the next day, and I was just amazed.
The household, it was just a normal, loving country family who stuck with each other, but with a live wire dad who ran the show.
My dad, he was a hard worker, taught us to work hard. And as a little kid, I'd go out hunting with my dad or fishing, or we'd go out cutting firewood or camping.
At the Stomps home, outdoor activities were limitless.
We had 17 acres, and we ran around all the woods and canyon all over the place. I go outdoors to play with. So.
Jerry and Lynn lived on some property that took a little bit to find the place. Jerry liked his ability to be unseen to the public, and this property that they had gave him all of that he would want.
They were growing Christmas trees, so they had different Christmas trees at different heights all over this 4 or 5 acres.
Though Christmas tree farming allowed Lynn and Jerry to make ends meet, their lives radically changed in 1991 when Lynn's father died and left her $1.7 million.
When the inheritance came in, I think Lynn felt relieved.
The couple used the inheritance to invest in several rental properties in and around Portland. With the stress of providing for their families lifted off their shoulders, Lynn and Jerry were able to enjoy life.
We always used to go salmon fish and spend a week down at the coast. It was always a lot of fun.
Still, it was important to Jerry that he and his family continued to live within their means.
They never owed any money. Jerry was a guy that would find a way to not buy anything on credit. He saved the money all the time. He bought his cars all cash.
By the late 90s, the two Stomps boys had left the nest, started their own families, and in 2004, Jerry and Lynn became grandparents.
They babysat his kids a lot, and they loved having their little ones out there again.
They were very much into it. They loved being the grandparents. He would grab those grandkids, and they were off. Let's go do this, and let's go do that. And I'm sure he wasn't staying around in the house and rocking them in a rocking chair. He was too much of an outdoorsman.
As the years ticked by, Lynn and Jerry fixed their eyes on one goal.
They were working very hard to have their retirement. All of their married life, that's what they were searching for, was how to get there fast.
But now it seems the life Jerry and Lynn Stomps worked so hard to build is falling apart. On February 6, 2009, Lynn Stomps is being treated after reportedly being attacked by two men she thought were there to buy her boat, and her husband Jerry is nowhere to be seen.
Where could they have put Jerry? Nobody could find him.
They're putting her on a gurney and bringing her to the ambulance.
As detectives arrive on the scene, they hit a roadblock when their only eyewitness is whisked away to the hospital.
At this stage of the investigation, what officers know is they have two outstanding suspects who were reported to be armed. So they had an ongoing threat to the safety of the community.
Coming up, a risky search effort commences.
This was a case where the officers pull out all stops, use all available resources. If you're being chased by a gun, it doesn't make any difference how big you are. You could be out there, you could be dead.
And chilling new details emerge.
I have this little bag thingy, and he just spins me around by grabbing it, and I go, and I'm sure he just pushed me right here, and over I went.
2009. First responders in Corbett, Oregon are gathered at the Gordon Creek Bridge, where a brutal attack on Lynn Stomps and her husband at the Gordon Creek Bridge, a search for 60-year-old Jerry Stomps commences.
This was a case where the officers pull out all stops, use all available resources, including air assets, canines, search and rescue teams.
We had a tracking dog out there along with several air sand dogs, and we started looking for him.
There were an awful lot of volunteers and a lot of resources from the sheriff's office, local law enforcement, just citizens. They were very thorough.
While the search teams scour the woods for Jerry, detectives get their first break in the case when Lynn Stomps is cleared to interview.
She had a broken pelvis, just split in half. And she had scratches all over her. She was just in a really bad way. She couldn't walk.
From her hospital bed, Lynn is finally able to give detectives more details about her attack.
So let's just start at the beginning.
Okay, we woke up. He told me he had this appointment with this guy that he was going to meet. He's anxious to sell the boat, but I don't want anybody we don't know who really isn't serious coming to the house. Sometimes I'm there by myself. So he said, okay. So he had made arrangements with this guy to meet him there.
Around what time do you leave the house?
We had to have left at 6:20, 6:30, no later than that.
Lynn says the couple left their boat at home and made the trip to see if the buyer, a man Jerry only referred to as Dave, was even worth their time.
Her story is when they got there, Jerry takes off with this Dave person down to the river, and they kind of disappear out of sight. She stays in the truck.
So they're walking, and I'm just sitting there. And then I thought, oh, I'll go. It's not raining at the moment. And so I started to get out the truck. I know as soon as I got my feet on the ground, I hear Jerry yelling, Lynn, run, run, Lynn, run. And I turn around, and there's this another guy right behind me, and he's got a gun out, and I just bolted for down the road.
Lynn says as she tried to outrun her assailant, she looked toward the woods and saw her husband.
I could see Jerry, but I couldn't see the guy.
Okay, what was Jerry doing?
He was running.
Which way?
Towards the river.
That's when Lynn says she felt the man catching up to her.
I'm on the bridge, basically. I have this little bag thingy, and he just spins me around by grabbing it, and I go, and I'm sure he just pushed me right here, and over I went.
And then what happens?
I'm unconscious for a while, and I can't get to my knees.
Mm-hmm.
I crawled all the way up the embankment.
After making her way up to the road, Lynn says it took more than half an hour for someone to spot her.
I was so frustrated that I yelled and yelled and yelled and yelled for someone to stop and help me.
With no other leads, detectives ask Lynn for more information about her attackers.
Can you describe those two individuals again?
Oh, okay.
The best you can.
Lynn described the attackers as being both white males, Dave being about 5'8" with brown hair, the other suspect being 6 foot tall, also with brown hair, and they were driving a gold-colored pickup.
Since Jerry had left their boat at home and the couple's truck wasn't stolen, detectives ask themselves, had these two men targeted Jerry for another reason?
Why do you think this happened? What do you think the motivation was for all this?
You know, I couldn't tell you. I don't understand it. It's not like he's got $1 million sitting in his pockets and they're going to relieve him of it right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
We're not into alcohol, drugs, or anything like that. We're just basic, normal people. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Jerry didn't owe anybody serious money.
Oh, no. No, no, no.
Yeah. You didn't owe any money to anybody.
No.
With no new insight on a potential motive for the attack, investigators bring in a forensic sketch artist to create composites of the suspects. The sketches are released to the public, hoping to generate leads. Meanwhile, detectives form theories of their own.
Well, the possibilities at the time obviously were robbery. Is this a robbery? Jerry was known in the community as someone who was not exactly big on government, didn't have a lot of trust. So is it possible that somebody thought that he had a lot of money around and that they could get that? That was possible.
Jerry was missing. You know, did he run into the river? Did someone kidnap him and they're going to hold him for ransom? You don't know.
He was a pretty big guy, pretty good sized, liked to hunt. But in either case, if you're being chased by a gun, it doesn't make any difference how big you are. You could be out there, you could be dead.
As daylight fades, investigators learn their search team back at the Gordon Creek Bridge have come up empty-handed.
Tracking dog kind of indicated nobody had been there. They didn't have anything out there.
Just as hope begins to fade, investigators receive a tip from a first responder.
Eric Eaton was a Corbett fireman who had responded to the crime scene, rendered aid to Lynn, and accompanied her to the hospital. After they had left, he continued having a conversation with Lynn, and Lynn relayed new information to him about what had occurred.
Lynn had a pretty good idea that the guy they were going to go meet down there this morning was the same gentleman that Jerry ran into a week ago.
Coming up, did Jerry's tough exterior rub some folks in town the wrong way?
Jerry was such a fella that he couldn't help but make enemies.
And a new discovery stops detectives in their tracks.
The first thing that caught my eye when I went around back was the burn pile.
There were bone fragments in the burn pile.
Detectives in Corbett, Oregon are trying to pinpoint an initial interaction between Jerry Stomps and his alleged attackers in the days leading up to his disappearance.
At this stage of the investigation, it's important that they get as much information as they can. Included in this is establishing a timeline of what was Jerry's activity in the last week. And the most solid information that the investigators have is the name of the one suspect, Dave. Dave was interested in purchasing.
In search of this information, detectives turn back to Jerry's wife, Lynn, who is still in the hospital.
Lynn recounted Jerry's activities in the previous week. This provided the officers with a lot of information that gave them leads to follow up on and ways they could corroborate the fact that prior to the reported disappearance on February 6th, Jerry had been around and been engaging in normal day-to-day activities.
Lynn says on Wednesday, February 4th, Jerry took some hay up to feed their cows in Klickitat County, Washington, where they own some farmland.
My dad got that property in Klickitat. He'd go up there quite a bit to feed the cows.
Did he spend the night or did he come back Wednesday?
He spent the night and he came back on Thursday.
Okay. And then when did he come back on Thursday?
He had been back before noon.
Could Jerry have run into some unsavory characters in Klickitat who later plotted to attack him?
In efforts to corroborate what Lynn had told them, officers spent a tremendous amount of time driving through the area where he was reported to have been on his way to Klickitat County.
Along the way, detectives learn that Jerry had a bit of a reputation.
We were able to open a few doors and talk to a few people. He was liked in the community. He was known a little bit as a hothead.
He spoke his mind, and whatever he thought, that's what he told you. And it wasn't always nice, you know. He could be very cruel. I believe that Jerry was such a fella that he couldn't help but make enemies.
Though many in the community know Jerry well, no one has seen him in the last few weeks. So detectives take a new approach.
Officers went to the Hood River Access Toll Bridge, which is on the Oregon-Washington border. While there, they obtained a videotape where they were able to identify Jerry's truck crossing the border.
But on February 4th, the day Lynn had said Jerry went to Washington, there was no sign of Jerry's pickup truck.
So I think that was a pretty clear indication that something wasn't right.
It's evident to detectives that someone isn't being entirely honest. Could Jerry have been involved with something or someone he wasn't telling his wife about? To find out, they confront Lynn at the hospital once again.
Typically on any suspicious disappearance, police want to look at that person's behavior. In other words, are there things that could precipitate violence, things such as family problems, having a girlfriend? So officers looked into this.
I'm going to be straight up with you. Was Jerry seeing somebody else, or were you seeing somebody else?
No. We are Christians, and no, he would. This is my husband. I'm just talking about their
love triangles
personalities.
too. We just want to know if there's
Is there
some type of love triangle going on, or either one.
No, I'm
You have a
married.
hint of Jerry
I'm
seeing-
married for life, and he did too. I told him the only way he was getting out of this. Ooh, I shouldn't say this. Getting out of this marriage was through death, his or mine.
Unsettled by their last interview with Lynn, detectives obtain a search warrant for her home.
When they got to the residence, officers noted that there was no sign of a forced entry. It was cluttered, but it hadn't been ransacked. They also noted that some portions of the residence appeared to have been meticulously cleaned, perhaps with bleach.
When we were searching in the house, there was a coat rack right by the front door. And on the coat rack was a fanny pack in which we located a revolver.
He just never really left the house without his gun. He took it everywhere with him, so why would he be going to meet some stranger without his gun?
When we look at the gun, there's 2 cartridges that are left. It was a revolver. Someone like Jerry, who carries a gun religiously, would not have 2 spent cartridges in his gun. Someone who carries on a regular basis, cleans their gun when they shoot it.
That's not the only alarming detail about Jerry's gun.
When they looked at this a little closer, they saw that there appeared to be blood spatter on the exterior of the firearm.
With high intensity light, you could see that there was a very fine mist of what appeared to be blood. The mist of it looked like high velocity blood. That was something you would see at a very close range of something being shot. The sample was sent to the Oregon State Police Crime Lab to determine if the blood was animal or human.
Investigators widen their search to the expansive properties surrounding the home.
We found several areas that looked really interesting. There was some fresh ground that had been dug in and covered over. Brought the dog up to him, didn't care. So we pretty much eliminated the front yard. And then we went around the back. The first thing that caught my eye when I went around back was the burn pile. We went over there and then the dog says, he's here, he's here, he's here, he's here, he's here.
Following the dog's lead, investigators begin a thorough search of the burn pile.
There were bone fragments in the burn pile. Now, it's not uncommon for a critter out in an area like that to get into a burn pile and end up burning up. So is it possible that it's not human? It is. It could be animal.
We, at the Oregon State Police, had a forensic anthropologist, and we collected some of the bones to determine if they were human.
But the search doesn't stop there.
They noticed a metal garbage can on the patio, and on closer inspection, they found what appeared to be charred bone remnants inside of this garbage can. They collected these for further identification. If the bones are human and the blood on the gun is Jerry's, then things have changed significantly.
In light of all the evidence, police are now fearing the worst and turn to the Stomp's phone records for answers.
Lynn had reported that Jerry had engaged in several phone calls with the one suspect, Dave, and gave specific times when these phone calls were purported to have occurred. Detectives obtained phone records to corroborate or refute the information that Lynn had provided.
When the phone records were examined for the Stomps residence, there was no record that anybody named Dave had called on the days that Lynn had mentioned.
As soon as those leads end, you look at video, you look at cell phone data, and determine that Lynn's story was questionable and changing.
Each piece of information like this that we get is breaking down her story, telling us that for some reason she's not telling us the truth.
As detectives contact those listed in the call history, a common theme emerges.
There's follow-up done from the phone calls to numbers that we know Jerry would have been involved with. What we determined was no one had actually spoken to Jerry since before the Super Bowl.
Coming up, a victim becomes a suspect.
And a lot of her story was slowly beginning to crack.
This is something you don't want to believe.
And detectives demand answers.
That's not the truth, Lynn. It's not the truth.
8 hours after Jerry Stomps was reported missing, his wife Lynn remains in the hospital, and police have found possible evidence of a violent crime at their home. After scouring call logs, it seems no one has seen or heard from Jerry since before Super Bowl Sunday, 5 days before Lynn's reported attack.
After gathering extensive information and doing a ton of legwork, the investigators sat down with the family and engaged in kind of a roundtable.
I remember all of us sitting around talking and asking questions.
It turns out that Jerry was more or less missing in action for several days, and Lynn always had an excuse that he was working in the yard, or he was hunting, or he had gone to the store.
Lynn's young grandchildren and their mom, Sam Stomps.
Sam Stomps provided the information that her kids were over for Super Bowl Sunday at Jerry and Lynn's house. They made a statement to Mom that they were a little upset because Papa Jerry wasn't there. And we were always told that he was there.
Did you see Papa Sunday night when you went up there? When you spent the night? Papa was there, right?
As their discussion continues, detectives uncover another useful piece of information.
Apparently, Lynn had lent their son, Jason, several $1,000s, and Jerry wasn't in on it. He didn't know about it. That's not something that he would have approved of. Lynn wasn't allowed to do a whole lot on her own, especially when it came to finances, without getting Jerry's approval.
When investigators dig into the couple's finances, they quickly realize a small loan to their son wasn't the only thing Lynn had been keeping from Jerry.
Lynn had $54,000 in unsecured, unreported credit that she had apparently been keeping secret from Jerry. The secret debt was a problem. Lynn had recently received an inheritance, so $54,000 may not seem like a significant amount. However, this was a family that was carrying several mortgages and were trying to manage their finances as best they could.
Jerry was an independent person who, from what I understood, did not like credit cards, did not like to be in debt.
Jerry would not be pleased with the fact that Lynn was running up the debt that she did. He was a pay your bills every month kind of person, didn't carry debt. So yes, this would have been completely against what Jerry believed.
Had Lynn's debt led her to do the unthinkable?
We know Jerry's a volatile person. Did he find out something about the other accounts that she had, the debt that she was in? That would have set Jerry off. That would have created a fight.
Though they may have uncovered a motive, investigators still haven't secured hard evidence connecting Lynn to any crime. Then, on February 10th, 4 days after Lynn was found on the side of the road, thorough police work generates a new lead.
They obtained a videotape where they were able to identify Jerry's truck going to a Shell station just across the border in Washington.
What was found was his truck pulling in, and we saw Lynn get out of the truck. She's driving his truck when she says that he's supposed to be up in Klickitat County.
They clearly showed that Lynn was engaging in behavior that was contrary to what she had told the officers. She was engaged in behavior deliberately trying to deceive the officers, and a lot of her story was slowly beginning to crack.
The next major break comes 2 days later when detectives are contacted by the State Crime Lab.
The State Crime Lab definitively identified the bone fragments as being human in nature.
Though investigators will have to wait to find out whether or not the bones are Jerry's, they are confident in what they've gathered thus far.
We knew at that point that we had a pretty strong case.
With this culmination of evidence and facts, they contacted Lynn one last time to give her an opportunity to explain her actions.
On February 12th, police confront Lynn in her hospital room once again.
You need to tell us. You need to tell us, Lynn.
Yes.
Just
what?
Please tell us what happened. If some accident happened.
I told you it.
Lynn, listen to me. Listen to me. We have not talked to one person, not one person, that saw Jerry from Friday before Super Bowl. That whole week, Lynn.
Yes. He was there with the children.
No, he was not, Lynn. That's not the truth.
What?
That's not the truth, Lynn. That's not the truth.
It is the truth. I don't know what's going on here. This is...
Look at me.
Oh, I'm going to be sick.
They presented Lynn with evidence that the timeline she had presented was not correct. Lynn didn't avail herself of this opportunity. Lynn denied any of the information.
We found video of the bridge in Hood River, the gas station, the Shell station. We've gone to other places to get video as well. Trying to find Jerry on video. We have not found him. Okay?
Did you find me on video?
We have you on video, yes.
Okay.
Detectives show Lynn still images pulled from the gas station surveillance footage.
I don't understand this. You're telling me that you're thinking I did... Oh.
No, we're not being accusatory.
I still believe he's alive.
Lynn.
I know that he's out there.
Lynn.
You're not looking for him.
We are looking for him. That has never stopped. What we're trying to do is give you an out.
I don't need an out. I know the truth.
Most times when presented with evidence, people will come clean. Lynn was the type of person that was never going to admit anything.
Detectives have heard enough. They place Lynn under arrest for the murder of her husband.
We were at the hospital, and the detectives pulled us aside and said they're arresting her for the murder. That was a very hard thing to hear. It's something you don't want to believe.
She didn't understand exactly why she was being arrested. Then when all of a sudden it came clear to her that they thought that she had murdered him, she started crying.
Coming up, the truth emerges.
They were able to determine these bone fragments came from a maternal ancestor.
And family ties are broken.
And they realized that they were standing by the wrong person. Last thing I remember him saying is, "I hope you burn in hell."
Her husband, Jerry, missing, 55-year-old Lynn Stomps is charged with his murder. As her trial approaches, Lynn's family and friends remain on her side.
She kept saying no, I didn't do it. I loved your father, Bob. That was a mistake.
I thought, well, they're going to check into this and give her a trial and find out that she's
Jerry. I mean, she was 4'8" and he was 6 foot something. And for her to hide him in such a way that nobody could find him, she couldn't do it.
However, as more details emerge, it becomes difficult for Lynn's supporters to ignore evidence of her guilt.
The bone fragments were sent to a forensic laboratory in Texas that conducted an analysis of mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA comes from the maternal or mother side. In this case, within a reasonable certainty, they were able to determine these bone fragments came from
out of Jerry Stomps.
In light of this new information, support from those closest to Lynn begins to crumble.
The two Stomps boys stood by their mother through a good chunk of the investigation, and I think eventually the writing was just on the wall, and they realized that they were standing by the wrong person.
Well, they started seeing that evidence the detectives had and everything, how it pointed to her for a while.
Lynn's trial begins on January 11th, 2011.
Lynn was about as impassive as I've seen a defendant in a court case. She did not look like a robust, healthy person. When I first saw her in the courtroom, she looked like she'd been through hell.
She just looked like everybody's grandmother. It was just kind of hard to believe that that woman could have done what she did.
However, prosecutors contend this demure widow is responsible for her husband's violent death. And although the exact motive still remains unknown, prosecutors suspect a dispute over money likely played a role in 60-year-old Jerry Stomp's murder.
It sounded like they were having some financial-based arguments.
I think something happened in their house. It could have been Super Bowl Sunday, and she decided that was it.
Lynn knew where there was a loaded pistol, where Jerry always kept it by the door, and whatever they were talking about or arguing about must have escalated, and Lynn grabbed Jerry's pistol and shot him twice at close range and killed him.
Prosecutors believe that in a panic, Lynn then burned her husband's body.
They had a large burn pile right out front. So the belief is that, did she kill him, put him on the large burn pile? He wasn't burning fast enough to get rid of the evidence. She used the trash can to make a hotter fire and put part of him in there.
Then, Lynn drove down to the Gordon Creek Bridge on the morning of February 6, 2009.
She drove down to Gordon Creek, apparently with the intention of planting evidence to make it look as if Jerry had gone fishing by himself and perhaps had gotten lost or drowned. In the course of her planting this evidence, she fell down.
As the evidence stacks up, things are not looking good for Lynn.
She did not testify, and the defense did not present much of a defense.
Lynn was very upset with the trial. She was just having to sit there and listen to what they were saying. It was like watching a freight train that was headed for a wreck and couldn't stop it.
After 2 weeks of trial, the jury returns a guilty verdict. At Lynn's sentencing hearing, her sons have a chance to say their piece.
Jason seemed to be totally choked up, and he just couldn't do it, and he left the stand. And then Adam took the stand, and it was the opposite. He was very vocal and very accusatory toward his mother.
At that point, I believed in my heart that she did it. Told my mother she was a monster, and I hope she burns.
It just seemed like there was nobody else in the courtroom except for those two for the time that went on. That's the only time that I really saw her possibly express true emotion.
On January 25, 2011, Lynn is sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. But even with a murder conviction, missing pieces haunt those involved in the case.
If I could ask her one question, I guess I'd ask her why. It still just blows my mind to this day. Why? How?
What is it that takes a woman who's married to a man for 39 years to kill him? I have no idea what that answer is.
This is a case where the only person that knows why this crime occurred is Lynn, and she's not sharing that information.
Restaurants are so rotten in prison, and she took a good man away from her. No, I would love to be remembered as he was, a good man.
In the quiet wooded hills of Tennessee, where neighbors know each other by name and church bells mark Sunday mornings, a darkness lurked behind the walls of an ordinary home. This is the story of Sylvia Vilch, a woman who left her native Costa Rica seeking the American dream, only to meet an unthinkable fate at the hands of those she loved most. This is a story about betrayal, violence, and a shocking discovery that would send shockwaves through the tight-knit community of Lewis Chapel. What started as a missing person report would unravel into one of the most disturbing murder cases Sequatchie County, Tennessee had ever seen. A case where a son would confess to beating his mother to death while his stepfather watched. A case where human remains would be found burned in a fire pit behind the family home. A case that proves the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers lurking in the shadows, but from the people sitting across the dinner table. Sylvia Vilch was 55 years old when her life came to a violent end in October 2025. Known affectionately as Gabby to her friends and family, Sylvia had built a life thousands of miles from her birthplace in Costa Rica. She had made the journey that millions of immigrants make, seeking opportunity and a better future in the United States. Sylvia had settled in Lewis Chapel, a small rural community in Sequatchie County, Tennessee on Lewis Chapel Mountain. This is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where people wave to each other on country roads, and Sunday church services are a cornerstone of community life, where people do not lock their doors at night, and where violent crime is something that happens elsewhere. To her neighbors and fellow churchgoers, Sylvia was exactly the kind of person any community would be lucky to have. She was described by those who knew her as a kind, devoted, and selfless woman. Someone who always put others before herself. Someone who showed up for church every Sunday. Someone seemed to embody the values that small-town America prides itself on: faith, family, and service. Sylvia lived in Gravesville, Tennessee with her husband, David Gardner, and her 18-year-old son, Gabriel Vilches. To the outside world, they appeared normal. Neighbors later told investigators that David and Gabriel seemed to have a loving relationship, that Gabriel was a regular kid, that nothing seemed to miss. But appearances, as this case would prove, can be devastatingly deceptive. On Tuesday, October 28, 2025, deputies from the Sequatchie County Sheriff's Office received a call that would set a horrifying chain of events into motion. Someone had reported concerns about Sylvia Vilch. She had not been seen, and people were worried. Deputies were dispatched to her residence to conduct what is called a welfare check, a routine procedure where officers knock on someone's door to make sure they are safe and well. When deputies arrived at the home that day, they were greeted by Sylvia's husband, 64-year-old David Gardner, and her son, 18-year-old Gabriel Vilches. The officers asked a simple question: "Where is Sylvia?" Both men had the same answer. She was traveling. She had gone on a trip to Costa Rica. They said it made sense on the surface. After all, Sylvia was Costa Rican. It would be natural for her to visit her home country, to see family and friends she had left behind. The deputies took the information and left. But something did not sit right with the investigators. As Detective Kaylee Smith of the Sequatchie County Sheriff's Office would later note in court documents, the stories from David Gardner and Gabriel Vilches were not adding up. There were inconsistencies in their accounts. Details that did not match, the kind of red flags that experienced investigators are trained to spot. And then there was the phone. In this digital age, cell phones leave digital breadcrumbs everywhere people go. They ping off cell towers, connect to Wi-Fi networks, and create a trail that can be traced. When investigators checked the location data for Sylvia's cell phone, they discovered something deeply troubling. Her phone was not pinging from Costa Rica or from any airport. It was pinging from right there at her residence. If Sylvia had traveled to Costa Rica, as her husband and son claimed, her phone would have gone with her, or at the very least, it would have shown activity at an airport or somewhere along a travel route. But it was at home, and Sylvia, according to her family, was not. This discrepancy was enough for investigators to take action. Detective Smith went to work obtaining a search warrant for the property. The initial welfare check had now escalated into a full missing person investigation with suspicious circumstances. By Thursday, October 30th, just 2 days after the initial report, investigators had their warrant in hand and were ready to search the Vilch Gardner home and the surrounding property. What they would find there would turn a missing person case into something far more sinister. When deputies entered the Vilch Gardner home on October 30th, they immediately knew they were looking at a crime scene. This was not a home where someone had simply packed their bags and left for a trip. This was a place where something terrible had happened. The evidence was overwhelming and impossible to ignore. According to the search warrant affidavit filed by Detective Kay Smith, investigators found multiple red stains on the carpet, stains they believed to be blood. But it was not just on the floor. There were red spatters on the walls, splattered across a desk, even splashed onto family photographs hanging on the walls. The kind of blood spatter that tells a story of violence, of impact, of a brutal assault. And then there was the vacuum. Sitting on the floor was a shop vac, the kind of heavy-duty vacuum people use in garages and workshops. Inside, it was a red liquid that investigators believed to be blood. Someone had tried to clean up. Someone had attempted to erase the evidence of what had happened in that house. But blood is incredibly difficult to fully remove, especially when there is a lot of it, and there was a lot of it. The scene inside the house told investigators that Sylvia Vilches had not gone to Costa Rica. She had not left this property voluntarily. Something violent had occurred within those walls, and the likelihood that Sylvia had survived it was growing slimmer by the moment. But the horror did not end inside the house. As investigators expanded their search to the property surrounding the home, they made a discovery that would confirm their worst fears and elevate this case to one of the most disturbing murders in Sequatchie County history. In the woods behind the house, investigators found a burn pit. And inside that burn pit, among the ashes and charred debris, were human remains, bones, fragments of a body that had been deliberately set on fire. As investigators combed through the area, they found additional remains scattered further into the woods. Pieces of a human being that had been destroyed and discarded like trash. The remains were immediately transported to the Tennessee Medical Examiner's office in Nashville for further examination and identification, but investigators already knew in their hearts what the forensic evidence would eventually confirm. These were the remains of Sylvia Vilch. With this grim discovery, the case was no longer a missing person investigation. It was now a murder investigation. And David Gardner and Gabriel Vilches, who had told deputies just days earlier that Sylvia was traveling in Costa Rica, were taken into custody and transported to the Sequatchie County Justice Center. What happened next would shock even seasoned law enforcement officers who had seen their share of disturbing cases. During a recorded interview at the Sequatchie County Justice Center, 18-year-old Gabriel Vills confessed to the murder of his mother. According to the arrest reports and affidavit filed by Detective Smith, Gabriel admitted that he had beaten his mother with a baseball bat. But the confession contained a detail that made this case even more horrifying. He said, he beat his mother to death while his stepfather, 64-year-old David Gardner, stood by and watched. To think about that for a moment. A son beating his mother to death with a baseball bat, and a husband, the woman's partner, the man who had vowed to love and protect her, standing there watching it happen, not calling for help, not intervening, not trying to stop the violence, just watching. But the brutality did not end with the murder itself. According to Gabriel's confession, after he had killed his mother, he and David Gardner dragged her body outside to a fire pit. And there, in the woods behind the home where Sylvia had lived, where she had made meals and celebrated holidays and tried to build a life, the two men burned her remains. They attempted to destroy the evidence of their crime by incinerating Sylvia's body, reducing her to bones and ash, scattering her remains in a burn pile and into the surrounding forest. It was an attempt to make her disappear, to erase her from existence, to avoid accountability for what they had done. Sheriff Bill Phillips of Sequatchie County spoke to local media about the case, and even he, a law enforcement officer with years of experience, seemed shaken by what investigators had discovered. In an interview, Sheriff Phillips described what deputies found when they executed the search warrant. "We executed the search warrant, and we found what was an obvious crime scene," Phillips told reporters. "And then ultimately, we found charred remains in the backyard of the property." When asked about a possible motive for such a heinous crime, Sheriff Phillips was honest about the limitations of the investigation at that stage. "Although we have been investigating for several days, we are still in an early phase," he said. And that is perhaps one of the most frustrating aspects of this case. Even with a confession, even with the physical evidence, the question of why remains murky. What could possibly drive a son to murder his own mother? What circumstances could lead a husband to not only allow his wife's murder, but to participate in the disposal of her body? What darkness existed in that home that the outside world never saw? Based on the evidence collected during the search and Gabriel Vilch's confession, both he and David Gardner were formally charged with 2 serious felonies: criminal homicide and abuse of a corpse. The criminal homicide charge is straightforward. Under Tennessee law, criminal homicide is the unlawful killing of another person. This charge encompasses various degrees of murder and manslaughter, and the specific degree would be determined as the case progressed through the legal system. The abuse of a corpse charge relates to what Gabriel and David did after Sylvia was killed. In Tennessee, as in most states, it is illegal to improperly handle or dispose of human remains. The burning of Sylvia's body and the scattering of her remains was not only a practical attempt to destroy evidence, but also a separate crime in itself. It showed a level of disrespect and dehumanization that goes beyond the murder itself. Both men were held at the Sequatchie County Justice Center as they awaited their initial court appearances. And when they finally stood before a judge, the legal system made clear that they would not be walking free anytime soon. During a court hearing on Friday, November 1st, a Sequatchie County judge made the decision to deny bond for both David Gardner and Gabriel Vills. This meant they would remain behind bars as the case moved forward. The judge clearly viewed both men as either a flight risk or a danger to the community, or both. The court also addressed the issue of legal representation. Gabriel Vilches indicated that he would need a public defender, meaning the court would appoint an attorney to represent him, because he could not afford to hire his own lawyer. He was assigned a public defender named Ted Engel. David Gardner initially told the court that he thought he could afford his own attorney and would be hiring private counsel. He eventually retained Michael Dow, a lawyer from Dunlap, Tennessee. However, the judge made it clear that there would be no delays. General Sessions Court judge warned Gardner directly. Once this date is set, whoever this lawyer is that you get, you must understand they must be ready to go on that preliminary hearing date. According to Assistant District Attorney Stephen Strain, a preliminary hearing for both defendants was scheduled for December 8, 2025, at 10 a.m. This preliminary hearing would be a crucial step in the legal process. At this hearing, the prosecution would present the basic elements of their case, and a judge would determine whether there was probable cause to believe that a crime had been committed and that these two men had committed it. If the judge found probable cause, the case would move forward to a grand jury and potentially to trial. News of Sylvia Vilch's murder sent shockwaves through Lewis Chapel. In a place where violent crime is rare, the idea that such a brutal murder had occurred was unfathomable. Neighbors struggled to reconcile what they knew about the family with the horrifying reality. Christy Webb, a neighbor, told reporters she had known Gabriel well. He hung out with his daughter, and they were best friends. Never ever would they have thought something like this would happen. The sentiment was echoed throughout the community. People who attended church with Sylvia remembered her as kind and devoted, someone who embodied Christian values. Multiple neighbors noted that David and Gabriel appeared loving, with no obvious signs of dysfunction. Behind the facade of a normal family, something dark was festering, and Sylvia paid the ultimate price. In many murder cases, there is an obvious motive. Money, jealousy, revenge, self-defense gone wrong. But in this case, the motive remains murky. Was there a history of abuse in the home that neighbors and friends never saw? Was there a specific incident or argument that led to the violence? Was Gabriel struggling with mental health issues that his family had been hiding? Was there some dark dynamic between David Gardner and his stepson that resulted in this deadly collaboration? These questions may be answered as the case proceeds through the legal system. More details may emerge during the preliminary hearing, during grand jury proceedings, or if the case goes to trial. Prosecutors may uncover text messages, emails, or other evidence that sheds light on what was happening inside that home. Mental health evaluations of Gabriel may reveal issues that contributed to the violence. But it is also possible that we will never fully understand why this happened. Human behavior, especially violent behavior, is often complex and multifaceted. There may not be a simple explanation or a single motive that makes sense of such a senseless act. What we do know is that Sylvia Vilch is gone, killed in a particularly brutal and callous manner by the two people who should have protected her most, her son and her husband. While much of the focus in true crime stories is often on the perpetrators, it is crucial to remember that behind every murder victim is a network of people left behind to grieve and to try to make sense of the senseless. According to reports from Costa Rican media, Sylvia Vilch left behind a daughter in Costa Rica. This young woman now faces an unimaginable tragedy. Not only has she lost her mother to murder, but the person accused of that murder is her own brother. Her family has been torn apart in the most violent and public way possible. Imagine receiving that phone call or knock on the door. Imagine learning that your mother is dead, murdered, and then imagine learning that your sibling is accused of the killing. The grief would be compounded by confusion, anger, betrayal, and probably a desperate search for understanding. For Sylvia's daughter, there will be no more phone calls with her mother, no more visits during the holidays, no more advice or comfort when life gets hard. Her mother is gone, reduced to ashes and buried in a foreign land, far from the Costa Rican home where she was born and raised. Beyond her daughter, Sylvia likely had other family members and friends in Costa Rica who loved her and who are now grappling with this loss. People who perhaps encouraged her journey to the United States, who believed she was building a better life, who thought she was safe and happy in Tennessee. The ripple effects of murder extend far beyond the immediate crime scene. They touch everyone who knew and loved the victim. Everyone who has to continue living in a world where that person no longer exists. As of the recording of this documentary, the case against Gabriel Wills and David Gardner is still in its early stages. Both men remain incarcerated at the Sequatchie County Justice Center, awaiting their preliminary hearing scheduled for December 8, 2025. At that hearing, prosecutors will present evidence to show probable cause that a crime was committed and that these two defendants committed it. If the judge finds probable cause, the case will likely be presented to a grand jury, which will decide whether to formally indict both men on the charges of criminal homicide and abuse of a corpse. If indictments are handed down, the case could proceed to trial. Given the serious nature of the charges and the confession that Gabriel Vilches allegedly gave to investigators, it is also possible that one or both defendants might consider plea agreements to avoid the uncertainty of a trial. The criminal justice system moves slowly, especially in murder cases. It could be months or even years before this case is fully resolved. There will be motions filed, hearings held, evidence presented, witnesses called. The process is designed to be thorough and deliberate to ensure that justice is served and that the rights of all parties are protected. But while the legal process grinds forward, a community continues to grapple with what happened on Lewis Chapel Mountain. A daughter continues to grieve the loss of her mother. And the question of why this happened, why a son would kill his mother, and why a husband would allow it, continues to haunt everyone touched by this tragedy. The murder of Sylvia Wills is a stark reminder that evil can lurk anywhere, even in peaceful places. It reminds us we can never truly know what happens behind closed doors, that the faces people present may hide terrible secrets. Sylvia came to the United States with hopes and dreams. She was by all accounts a good, kind person who cared about others and tried to be a positive presence in her community. Instead, her life was cut short in the most violent way at the hands of her own son, while her husband watched. As this case moves through the legal system, we hope justice will be served, that the full truth will come to light, that Gabriel Vilch and David Gardner will be held accountable, and that Sylvia's memory will be honored. This case from Lewis Chapel, Tennessee, reveals a profound breakdown of the most fundamental human bonds and societal expectations, a chilling testament to the ancient truth that the greatest threats often emerge not from external enemies, but from within the very household, from those sworn to love and protect. Here, we witness a son, Gabriel Vilches, confessing to the brutal murder of his mother, Sylvia Vilch, by beating her with a baseball bat, while his stepfather, David Gardner, stood by, a silent witness to the horror, only to then collude in the grotesque disposal of her remains in a burn pit. This is not merely a crime. It is a civilizational wound, a betrayal of the primal contract between parent and child and between spouses. The setting itself, a quiet, rural community where doors are left unlocked and violent crime is a distant rumor, underscores the insidious nature of this evil. Such environments, often seen as bastions of traditional values, faith, family, service, are paradoxically vulnerable to the shock of domestic barbarity because their very fabric of trust is predicated on the assumption that such acts are impossible within their borders. The initial deception, the fabricated story of Sylvia traveling to Costa Rica, highlights a classic tactic of perpetrators attempting to manipulate the truth, a maneuver as old as crime itself. Yet, the digital age, with its ubiquitous digital breadcrumbs from cell phone pings, provides a modern countermeasure, a technological eye that sees through the most carefully constructed lies. This technological transparency, while a boon for law enforcement, also reveals the utter contempt for truth and consequence held by the perpetrators. The discovery of the crime scene, blood spatters on walls, a desk, family photographs, and a shop vac filled with blood-soaked liquid, speaks to a desperate yet ultimately futile attempt to erase the evidence. This frantic, cleanup effort, common in crimes of passion or convenience, reflects a primitive impulse to deny reality, to physically scrub away the stain of guilt, even as the moral stain remains indelible. The subsequent discovery of Sylvia's charred human remains in a burn pit behind the home, with additional fragments scattered in the woods, elevates the barbarity to a level that transcends mere murder. This act of desecration, the incineration and scattering of a human body, is not just about destroying evidence. It is about dehumanization, an attempt to erase the victim's very existence, to deny her dignity even in death. This level of disrespect for the dead is a hallmark of societies in decline, where the sacredness of human life and its memory are eroded. Historically, the treatment of the dead has always been a barometer of a civilization's moral health. From the elaborate burial rituals of ancient Egypt to the solemn funeral rites of the Greeks and Romans, respect for the deceased was paramount, often seen as essential for the soul's journey or for maintaining cosmic order. To deny proper burial, to desecrate remains, was considered an act of profound impiety, a crime against both humanity and the divine. The burning of Sylvia's body echoes the most brutal acts of ancient warfare or tyrannical regimes, where the bodies of enemies were often left unburied or destroyed, to deny them passage to the afterlife or to instill terror. Think of the Assyrians, who would flay their enemies and displace their skins, or the Roman practice of denying burial to traitors, leaving their bodies to be devoured by scavengers. While the context here is domestic, the underlying impulse to utterly annihilate the victim's physical presence and memory is disturbingly similar. The confession of Gabriel, detailing the baseball bat beating while his stepfather watched, is a stark revelation of moral collapse within the family unit. The stepfather's passive observation, his failure to intervene, and his subsequent participation in the disposal of the body transforms him from a mere bystander into an accomplice in the most profound sense. This complicity, this abdication of the husband's role as protector, speaks to a deep-seated pathology, a willingness to sacrifice familial duty for some unknown, darker allegiance or self-preservation. Such a scenario brings to mind the tragic dynamics often seen in dysfunctional aristocratic families of the Roman Republic or Renaissance Italy, where power, inheritance, or hidden resentments could lead to parricide or fratricide, with other family members turning a blind eye or even assisting in the dark deeds for their own twisted gains or out of fear. The question of motive remains murky, a common feature in crimes that defy rational explanation. Was it money, jealousy, a history of abuse, mental health issues, or some dark, unspoken dynamic between the stepfather and stepson? The inability to readily identify a clear, singular motive often points to a complex interplay of factors, a slow festering of resentment, pathology, or a sudden, explosive break from reality. This murkiness itself is a symptom of a deeper societal malaise, where the inner lives of individuals, even within families, can become utterly opaque, hiding monstrous intentions behind a facade of normalcy. The community's shock, their inability to reconcile the kind, devoted, selfless Sylvia and the normal family with the horrifying reality, is a recurring theme in such cases. The public face, the appearances, as the narrative notes, can be devastatingly deceptive. This societal blindness to the darkness within is not unique to modern America. It is a timeless human failing. The ancient Greek tragedians, from Aeschylus to Sophocles and Euripides, constantly explored this theme, the respectable facade of the noble house concealing incest, murder, and matricide, driven by fate, hubris, or generational curses. The house of Atreus, with its cycle of murder and revenge, Agamemnon sacrificing Iphigenia, Clytemnestra murdering Agamemnon, Orestes murdering Clytemnestra, serves as a timeless parallel to the hidden horrors that can erupt from seemingly ordinary families. In these Greek tragedies, the community often only learns of the atrocities after the fact, when the blood has already been spilled and the moral order irrevocably broken. The legal process that follows, charges of criminal homicide and abuse of a corpse, denial of bond, appointment of public defenders, preliminary hearings, represent society's attempt to restore order, to impose accountability, and to seek justice. Yet, the slow, deliberate grind of the criminal justice system, while necessary for due process, can never fully heal the wounds or answer the existential questions posed by such a heinous act. The murder of Sylvia Vilch, a woman who sought the American dream only to find an unthinkable end at the hands of those she loved, is a tragic reminder that the veneer of civilization is thin, and that the capacity for evil, even within the most intimate relationships, is a constant, lurking shadow. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that the greatest dangers often reside not in the distant, unknown other, but in the familiar faces across the dinner table, in the very heart of what we presume to be safe and sacred. This is a lesson that history, from ancient myths to modern headlines, has repeatedly tried to teach us, yet one we seem perpetually destined to relearn through fresh acts of barbarity. The collapse of the family unit, the ultimate betrayal of trust, is a sign of a deeper societal fracture, a weakening of the foundational institutions that bind us together, leaving individuals vulnerable to the darkest impulses of human nature. This brutal murder in Lewis Chapel, Tennessee, is far more than an isolated criminal act. It is a stark, chilling revelation about the health of our current system and civilization, a testament to the fragility of social trust and the insidious decay that can fester unseen within the most fundamental unit of society, the family. When a son murders his mother and a husband stands by, then aids in the desecration of her body, it signals a profound moral collapse, a rupture in the very fabric of human decency that underpins any functioning society. This is not merely a breakdown of individual character, but a symptom of a broader societal sickness, where traditional bonds of kinship, loyalty, and protection have become so attenuated that they offer no defense against the most primal forms of violence. The short-term consequences are immediate and devastating. A family shattered, a community in shock, grappling with an unfathomable evil that occurred in their midst. The illusion of safety in a peaceful rural setting is shattered, replaced by a gnawing suspicion that no home is truly secure, no relationship entirely trustworthy. This erodes the very social trust that allows communities to thrive, making neighbors question what secrets lie behind closed doors, fostering a climate of fear and isolation. The legal system, in its slow, deliberate process, will seek to assign blame and administer punishment, but it cannot restore the lost life, nor can it fully mend the psychological wounds inflicted upon Sylvia's surviving daughter and other loved ones. The long-term consequences are even more insidious. Such acts of extreme familial betrayal chip away at the collective understanding of what it means to be human, to be a family member, to be a neighbor. They normalize, in a perverse way, the idea that the most intimate relationships can be sources of ultimate harm, thereby weakening the deterrent effect of social norms and moral prohibitions. When the most sacred bonds are violated with such impunity and barbarity, it sends a message, however unintended, that foundational values are negotiable, that the sanctity of life, especially within the home, is not absolute. This contributes to a broader societal cynicism, a distrust not just of individuals, but of the institutions that are supposed to uphold order and protect the vulnerable. The very concept of deterrence is undermined when the perpetrators are those who should be protectors, for it suggests a pathology that transcends rational calculation of consequences. The institutions of family, community, and law enforcement are all tested. The family, as the primary incubator of moral values and social stability, has failed catastrophically here. The community, once a haven of trust, is forced to confront its own vulnerability and the limits of its informal surveillance. And while law enforcement ultimately uncovered the truth, the initial deception and the hidden nature of the crime highlight the inherent difficulty in policing private spaces and domestic relationships. This case, like so many throughout history, from the patricide in ancient Rome to the hidden abuses in modern households, reveals that the greatest threats to a civilization often come not from external barbarians at the gates, but from the barbarians within, those who have shed the moral constraints that define humanity. If these patterns of profound domestic violence and betrayal continue to emerge with such chilling regularity, it suggests a deeper societal illness, a spiritual or moral void that no amount of material prosperity or technological advancement can fill. The ultimate consequence is a society increasingly atomized, fearful, and devoid of the deep, unconditional trust that allows individuals to flourish and communities to cohere. The memory of Sylvia Vilch, a woman who sought a better life and found only betrayal and a brutal end, serves as a tragic monument to this ongoing civilizational struggle, a reminder that the health of a society is ultimately measured by the strength of its most intimate bonds and its unwavering commitment to protecting the innocent from the very people who should